So, Tim, thank you very much for joining us. We are honoured tonight to have you, really. One of the best British runners that we've had for a long, long time. So, do you still feel like a runner?
Gosh, no. No, I did. I sort of tried through my 30s and 40s, running 3 or 4 times a week, I guess maybe a little bit more in my up to about 45. And then in my mid 50s, about 2016, actually, I developed atrial fibrillation, a slight issue with my ticker. Essentially, cut a long story short, for the last 5 years, I run about 3 times a week for half an hour, very, very slowly. It's almost like this heart issue, even though it's been corrected with some minor surgery. It's like there's a glass ceiling. I just can't run hard anymore. I can't pick up a pace. I mean, okay, minor point, I'm 62. Could be something to do with that. But I actually just can't run hard anymore. It's very strange. I'm not complaining because I'm not one of those dyed-in-the-wool lifelong lovers of running who gets itchy if he can't run. I enjoy gin and tonic or a game of tennis just as much, sort of thing. So I'm quite happy, and I run probably 3 times a week for half an hour, and that's fine.
That's still pretty impressive. That's more than I'm doing at the moment. So well done.
I haven't told you how little ground I cover in that half hour, have I?
It doesn't, as long as you're running or shuffling, that's fine, isn't it? At least you're getting out and doing something. Rob, we're just going to start off with top 3 things. So top 3 athletic performances that you did, not anybody else. What do you think are your top 3?
Gosh. Yeah, no, I had a little look at this earlier. I think probably... it's kind of a bit of a cliche and very obvious, but I'd have to go with my 4th place in LA in '84 because I've been injured a lot in the spring. I've been injured for about 6 weeks, having run very well in the World Cross Country in the March. I then abruptly hit the buffers and had shin problems for weeks and weeks. Incredibly frustrating, and I basically clawed my way back to fitness through the spring and into the early summer, and just scraped into the team. And then obviously finished in 4th place, and I'd never used altitude. It was my 3rd race in 4 days, running a 13:11. It was sweltering hot, all sorts of little things which make me confident I could have run a lot faster, but then everybody says that about their personal best. And then probably my personal best in the mile was in Edinburgh on a fairly windy day, ran 3:54. We went through half mile or 800 in 2 minutes. And Graham Williamson, who was an absolute god, I mean, a lot of you won't be familiar with that name, I'm sure, but he was actually possibly better than Crammy. It's just that Graham's career was blighted with injuries and illnesses. And he ran a 3:50 mile, Graham. He was pretty useful, but Graham just stormed away the second half of this mile in Edinburgh. And I think he ran 3:52, and I ran down the home straight with my getting nearer and nearer to the ground as the lactic kicked in, but still managed 3:54. So that race again told me I could have run probably 2 or 3 seconds quicker in better conditions. And World Cross Country in '89 when I was 2nd, I suppose, because I was coaching myself. I think, you get to I was 30 at the time. You should by that age know 90% of what you need to do. It's good to have a sounding board, somebody to chat things over with and chew on. But basically, I'd been out to Kenya for 4 or 5 weeks prior to that, done what I knew would work, and was in fantastic shape for if it had been a flat, fast cross country, I think I'd have been 2nd. If it was clawing, deep, revolting mud like it turned out to be in Norway, I was able to be 2nd. So, yeah, that's probably it. A little spread there, 5,000 a mile and a cross country race.
Excellent. Right. We'll come back to those in a while. Next thing, you do commentating now, which is we all know. What are your top 3 commentating highlights? I think probably calling the 10,000 final in Sydney in 2000 between Haile Gebrselassie and Paul Tergat. I mean, if some of you haven't Googled that race, then do. Other providers are available, by the way, search engines. But Gebrselassie against Paul Tergat, the last 300 meters of that 10,000 in the Olympics in Sydney 2000 was just unbelievable. It was one of those races where you can see 2 guys and they're both screaming at themselves inside their heads, I'm not going to lose this, I'm not going to lose this. And of course, one of them does in the last meter. It is an astonishing clash. So that one, I think. What else? The world record for 100-meter hurdles back in 2016 by Kenny Harrison in London at the Olympic Stadium. I think it was still the Olympic Stadium then. Of course, now it's the London Stadium, which is just ridiculous. I mean, how can you not want a stadium to retain the name, the Olympic Stadium? Anyway, Kenny Harrison, the American, ran a world record for the 100 hurdles, and I loved calling that race and got it right, I think. And she dipped under the electric beam. So the time 12:58 came up, something like that. And immediately I went, hang on a minute, she's won it by about 5 or 6 meters. That's not right. And she did indeed run 12:20, I think it was, or 12:19. I suppose commentating highlight after that would have to be a mile where Alan Webb ran in Paris against a French guy whose name escapes me now. It was in 2007, I think. And again, it was just a fabulous race where Alan Webb, it was not that memorable in terms of it wasn't a championship race or anything like that. It was a Diamond League race. But Alan Webb ran 3:30 to beat this French fella who was the favourite, who had just run 3:31. And it was just another one of those marvellous clashes where they're busting a gut round the last 300 at a very fast pace. And, you know, it looks like the French fella coming off the final bend is just not going to lose. He's got 2 or 3 meters on Webb, and Webb, talk about mind over matter. Webb just claws his way past him in the last 10 or 15 meters. Great race, which stands out in my mind. And I'm lucky, you know, I've been commentating for 30 years. I've probably covered several races per season that are fantastic and really enjoyable to commentate on, but that one stands out.
Cool. Now, moving on to something, well, it's the same thing really, but top 3 athletic performances of all time.
Yeah, I think I would go to Crammy and the Commonwealth Games in 86. 1986 Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh, where at the last minute, Guinness came in as a sponsor, and it was a very troubled games financially. But Crammy ran the 800 and won from Tom McKean, who ran 144, I think. Crammy, in a damn gale, I mean, it was blowing really strongly, ran 143, and he was cruising. I mean, if ever he could have broken the world record for 800, I think it would have been that day or that week. And he won the 1500 as well, incidentally, at that Games with about a 51 last lap. But I think that was just perhaps the most majestic I've ever seen Crammy, was at the Commonwealth Games in 86. And then Mike Powell in 91, the long jump, the World Championships in Tokyo. It was my first big championships as a commentator. I was still harboring thoughts of making a comeback myself at that point, but my hamstring injury kicked in and was well on the way to ending my career. And Eurosport sent me out to Tokyo to a sweltering Olympic Stadium and World Championships, where I did about 3 jobs. But Mike Powell's long jump world record, 895, was the highlight of the field events for me there. And of course, it was a great dust up with Carl Lewis. They kept swapping lead. And then another jump, actually, Jonathan Edwards in 1995, when he set his world record for the triple jump. I mean, it's still untouched. It's come under threat. Few people are giving it a scare, but you know, you look at what Jonathan achieved there. And again, and if you haven't seen it, Google it. Jonathan's triple jumping in Gothenburg, I think it was out of this world. And you see the speed and the power, and yet the fluidity and the almost balletic movement that he was able to generate through his phases in just about every round. It was, again, almost science fictionally good. So those a little spread there.
That last one's perfect, because I was actually there in Gothenburg and watched that triple jump, and it was when you just measure it out afterwards, you just think, wow, how can you actually jump that far? It was pretty unbelievable, wasn't it? Okay, now on to top 3 words of wisdom to endurance athletes at the moment.
Gosh, I think probably it depends. You can put them in any order, but I would say do get a coach. Get good advice, get somebody who knows your event, what you're trying to achieve, and listen to that person and share ideas with them. And if there's things you don't understand, ask. And if you're given sessions or training to do that you don't understand, ask. And even in the latter part of a career, you know, like I was saying, when I was 30, I thought I knew most things. You still need a sounding board. So get a coach. 2 heads are better than one. And that's never truer than in athletics and distance running, where you've got so many options. Do I go for a 10-mile run or a 15-mile run? Do I do 10 400s or do I do 6 400s? You know, and what's the physiology behind all that? I would say don't get injured. I had more than my fair share of injuries through my career, and it causes such massive hiccups in your progression. I think I almost was only fit every other year in the 10 years or so. I was sort of round and about being a pretty good runner, and that I have great regrets for that. And I'm very envious of, I don't want to say jealous of, but envious of people who manage to avoid injuries and have good season after good season after good season. I hardly ever did that, and I wish I had my time again to try and get that part right. Although I think very often injuries are something it is hard to control. A lot of it is in the lap of the gods. But I would say err on the side of caution, and maybe I didn't do that enough. I would have invested more money and effort into maintenance, bodily maintenance. I would have spent more money on a massage as a professional runner. Obviously, you can justify that. Getting at least a weekly massage, and I would have spent more time doing stuff that enables you to avoid injury, like better conditioning, all-round conditioning. And I would say, whether you get a coach or not, train to a plan, set yourself goals, always have little goals to aim at, and a bigger goal further in the middle distance, if you'll forgive the pun. It's very easy to, and it's what I do now. I just go out and run for half an hour, 3 or 4 times a week. I've been doing that for years and years. And then there's no plan because I've got no goals. But train to a plan, set yourself goals, and train to a plan and try and stick to it. And one of the great skills is knowing when to be flexible in that plan and making adjustments and tweaks. And of course, one of the great conundrums of being a middle and long distance runner is that you have to train through a lot of pain when you're doing interval sessions, or you're doing hills, or you're doing long runs and so on. And when do you listen to the aches and pains of your body and recognize it as an injury? And when do you say, no, I've got to push through this because I'm just feeling uncomfortable because it's hard work? So, I would say have a plan and stick to it as best you can.
Okay, lovely, very good. And then finally, on these top 2 things, what would you do differently now you know what you know for your running career?
I would have used altitude much earlier in my career because it does help if used right. I would have possibly changed coaches sooner than I did. Frank Hall was a wonderful coach of young up-and-coming people, athletes through to about the age of 20, junior internationals. He had them galore, English schools champions. He had them, dozens of them. But when it came to coaching world-class athletes in the modern era, I think Frank was slightly lacking. He had one foot back in the swashbuckling grand old days of the 50s, where Gordon Pirrie was doing hill sessions in army boots and that sort of thing, and that's just laughable now in the very modern era we're in. And I think I should have moved on to a coach with a little bit more understanding of the requirements of being a world-class runner. And that's a very hard decision. Leaving a coach, thanking somebody, saying, look, we've run the course, is really, really hard. And I bottled out of that with Frank for 2 or 3 years. And that might have been a critical changeover period in my career. So altitude, probably choosing more wisely a coach for that big meaty part of the middle of my international career. And actually just being a little bit more dedicated attention to detail. I look at what athletes are doing now, world-class athletes, getting tons more sleep than I used to get, not drinking alcohol, not partying, maximizing the opportunities that you have in that core period of your talent. I think it's very easy to not make the most of the opportunities you're presented with. But actually, as a world-class athlete, you've got that window, for argument's sake, between 20 and 30. But for argument's sake, some would say, well, it's between 20 and 35 if you really look after yourself. But actually, after that, you can go partying and drink as much as you like and do anything you want for the rest of your career. You can get chubby and fat and enjoy life and bacon sandwiches every day. But actually, through those core years, be really, really focused and dedicated. And I wasn't quite on the money in that regard. So, I have regrets about, to a degree, just the lifestyle that I lived in. I think partly it was the era we lived in. I think nowadays people are away at training camps half the year and it's imposed upon them. There is so much more knowledge now about the little differences. What's that phrase from cycling? Marginal gains. Marginal gains. Yeah. If I look at all the marginal gains that I could have I could have taken advantage of. They come to quite a cumulative amount.